Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second season of the podcast. I'm Victoria, and today I'm delighted to be joined by the Hirsch family, two generations of EjM alumni, Charles-Henri Hirsch and his children, Anne-France, Elisabeth, and Alexandre. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview and having me at your house here in the south of France. Since we have an international school, I always ask this question because people can come from all around the world. To begin, I was wondering if you can each share a brief introduction about yourself, for example, where you were born and what languages you speak, and of course, when you graduated from EjM and what your current academic or professional situation is.
Okay, so I was born close to Paris, so in Paris. Then I went to school at EjM when I was 6. So from not maternelle, but CP or CE1 equivalent to terminal. Then I went to classe préparatoire in France. I managed to get in Ecole Polytechnique. Then I continued another degree at MIT. And finally I started to work in Russia. And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I speak French, English, and Russian.
So my name is Elisabeth. I graduated from EjM in 2013. I then went to the University of Exeter in England. I studied international relations and economics there. Then I came back to France and I started looking for a job, but it was kind of complicated to find a job. So I continued my studies and went to get a master's at EBS. It's Ecole de Commerce. And I studied digital marketing. And I did it in alternance, so I managed to get some work experience at the same time in that field. And then I got bored of that field as well.
I was also born in France, and then we moved to Russia, and then we moved back to France. And so I'm fully bilingual in English, French, and Russian, but mainly in English, which is so weird. And I took like 20 years of Spanish, but none of that, nothing. So I graduated IB EjM from May 2015. And then I went to NYU in New York, and I graduated in 2019. And there I studied business and sociology.
My name is Alexandre Hirsch. I was born in France, but I spent most of my childhood in Russia until I was 8 years old. And then from 8 to 18 I was at EjM. And I graduated in 2018, Bac S. And then I did a bachelor's degree at Ecole Polytechnique in mathematics and computer science. And then I did a master's degree also at Polytechnique in artificial intelligence and visual computing. I speak French and English fluently, Russian almost fluently, not perfect. And Spanish I did a little bit in high school, so I remember bits of it, and it's an easy language to pick up when you have French and English, so I would say intermediate. But I also did Mandarin in high school, until the end of high school. Then I didn't do it so much after, so I forgot a lot of it, and it's not easy anyway, so it's easy to forget. But I did the HSK3 and I think 4e, 3e, something like that. So at the time I knew 300 words. But since then, not much. But yeah. And professionally right now, so I just finished my internship. Almost finished. This week is the last week. And now I'm going to take a short break, and then I'm going to apply for jobs in Paris in the field of AI, and maybe education, maybe medical. I'm a bit broad in the specific applications of AI, but I think there's a lot of interesting things to do in those areas.
Yes, you were eager to discover new education systems. But did you also want to discover them by yourself as a student to study in other countries when you were applying? For example, you did the SAT were you planning to apply also to the US, for example?
Yeah, so I applied to a lot of universities in the US and just a few in France. And the ones in the US I was interested in because it was some of the top universities in the world. But I didn't get the chance to study there, unfortunately. And the SAT is, the SAT is important for those universities. It's not really important in life. When you're good at those tests, you're just good at those tests. It's just a matter of studying for them specifically. So they're a bit useful for getting in the testing mindset, but if you don't get good grades in those, it doesn't mean you're a bad student. But yeah, so I did the SAT mainly for there. I also did the GRE, that's for a master's student to enter a master's degree, and those they look at it a bit everywhere sometimes. Yeah, and so yeah, the US I wanted to study there initially, but I knew of some people that studied there, and it's something you really have to adapt to. I think as a French person, even as international as you can be from EjM, it's America is depending on what city you land in, it can be not necessarily easy. So I'm not really disappointed that I didn't get to go there. I did go a few times there, and it's something you really have to adapt to the life there. And I'm happy with the studies that I did in France, which were very much like I got to be part of the old and the new kind of perspectives at Polytechnique, because I had a father who I grew up with who always talked about Polytechnique at home, but I also had two older sisters who studied abroad and nothing to do with mathematics, and so I had like a spectrum of perspectives at home, and also all the people I knew at EjM. So going to Polytechnique, who was moving from just being this old French institution to an international, something that can be recognized internationally, I got to see both sides, and which is why I participated in the board of directors, because unfortunately in the board of directors there weren't enough representatives of the new. I was the youngest, of course, and so all the other ones were all the other all the other members of the school are all people that had gone through prépa and through Polytechnique itself. So they were just representing themselves and the interests of the school. And I think you always learn more from outside perspectives, and it's going in that direction at that school anyway. So I'm very glad to hear that.
We started in seconde, and back when I was in EAB, we started, they asked us to specialize for the seconde, so we had 3 years of specialization, but it was like kind of a pre-preparation. EjM loves preparation.
I love that.
So I went with S. I did the scientific one initially. I started with that because my dad pushed me to do that, because back in his day, S was the best kind of. It was the specialization that was going to give you the most opportunities, at least. So he pushed me to do that, and I did it for 2 years, and I struggled a lot because I was not really into math personally. That was not my thing. And so at the end, in Terminal, I switched to ES. So I finished with a bac in ES, Option Internationale.
Which you did much better in.
Which I preferred, yes, because it was way more suited to my interests. I do kind of sometimes regret not doing IB, because it seemed like it was a very good way to prepare for a higher education in other countries like America or England. I struggled a lot when I started university in England, because I was not accustomed to the way that we had to hand in our assignments, coursework, etc. Because in the French bac system, it's mostly exams and like a few quizzes and tests there. Whereas in IB, I remember from what my sister did, she prepared a lot of essays and she gave in a lot of coursework. So it was more. I think it prepared her better for higher education and abroad.
Thank you for this introduction. You, Mr. Hirsch, you graduated a little bit earlier from EjM than your children. This was in 1981, before you went on to study math and physics at Louis le Grand. Could you share with us your high school grades that helped you gain admission to this prestigious prépa?
Well, first I should say that it's not even my parents or myself who chose Louis le Grand. It's the school itself.
Who recommended you?
They wanted to have some students there. This was not my first or second or even third choice. It was not on the list. So this is just the school which put it on the list. So yes, I was pretty good in mathematics at the time. I think my grades were 18 out of 20 in mathematics and physics.
And then you attended Ecole Polytechnique, like you said, and graduated with a master's from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about this eight-year-long higher education journey?
Well, first, just to go back to École Active Janine Manuel, which at the time was École Active Bilingue, this was very open-minded in terms of school. Switching to Louis le Grand was a big shock, as I'm telling in this article I told you about, with a very rigid education. So here I spent 3 years because I doubled my maths pay. That was pretty horrible, I should say. Although at the time this was really the way to go when you were good in school, this is no longer the case. Classe préparatoire is not the way forward today, I should say. So, of course, a lot of mathematics and physics, and eventually I doubled because I didn't work enough. And I managed to get in École Polytechnique on the second year of maths P. And then a piece of cake, of course, because once you've succeeded in these exams, usually you don't do much afterwards, which is a lot of what happened to me to some extent. So at this time, you had a 1 year military time, which I spent in special forces. I was good in also good physically, and then at Première Pima, it's special forces and French special forces specializing on the Middle East and Africa. Then 2 years at École Polytechnique, studying once again mathematics and physics. And then I had the opportunity at the time you were compelled to continue studying for 2 years after École Polytechnique in order not to pay what is called in France the pantoufle. That is the price of your studies, because in École Polytechnique you're a military person, so you're paid a salary. And so one of the exits to continue studying without being very bored was to go to the US. And I managed to get in MIT for a master's degree in material science and engineering.
And I guess this is why your son Alexandre, who recently graduated from the bachelor program, did the bachelor program and not the prépa, like you say. What's worth mentioning is that you also contributed to creating this program back in 2017. I was wondering if you could tell us more about this program and perhaps explain why you both chose different paths, like for you who did the prépa path and Alexandre who did the bachelor one.
Yeah, first I must say I didn't contribute at all to creating the program of the Bachelor Polytechnique. But it happens that I did help a lot the first dean of this program to get into contact with Ecole Janine Manuel and to present that to Ecole Janine Manuel. And as a result, it was pretty successful, because 6 or 7 students from Ecole Janine Manuel out of 70 for the first promotion, and now probably more, are indeed getting into this bachelor's program. So, and at the time, and I think probably still today, this is the largest number for a single school to get in.
I wanted to ask you specifically about this choice that you made between, first between America and France, but also between the prépa program and the bachelor one that you did. For example, I did an interview with Sacha Rosenbaum, who came to our school in Paris when he was 16 years old. So, for example, he wouldn't have been able to do the prépa program. But why did you choose the bachelor program over prépa? The newer, more modern, revised kind of path to STEM in France.
So I was on the way to do prépa if I hadn't applied to the US universities because it was what I was hearing at home, because it was something my father did and he was good at mathematics, and with my sisters, of course, it was out of the question because they were not interested in mathematics at all, but I was, so to him it was the standard thing to do. If I was studying in France, it would be the prépa, and he had gone through it, and he had gone through it years ago, and in the end he started seeing that in fact the prépa system is not perfect. There are a lot of criticisms that can be made of it. There are also a lot of good aspects about it, but the way it's sold is a bit misleading because France has a very rigid kind of style of education sometimes, and what happens is in the end you're not necessarily selecting the smartest, in a sense, smartest students in a field. You're selecting the students that can handle the most pressure, and that's very good in its way, but it also excludes some other types of students. And so in that way I think the prépa is a bit too rigid and not really adapted to how the world is today. And of course it also completely closes the door to international students that want to apply to those schools through that path at that point. So it used to be that international students at Polytechnique entered only later than them and through different pathways or in different programs, and so they were not necessarily well integrated with the French students. And now all of that's changed. Now it's there are separate programs, but there's a lot more links between those programs. Some courses are shared. Most professors are shared, and the only difference is that in one class they teach in English and the other in French. So so to go back to why I chose the bachelor is in the end it did not seem like the prépa was my type of profile. Also at EjM there are only, in my year there were only 3-4 students that went to prépa anyway, so it's not something that EjM students generally do. The STEM students, they usually go to the UK or to the US, and that's because they have the ability to do that because on average they speak way better English than a French student elsewhere. So I could have done that, but I saw the opportunity to do it in France, but in an English setting as they would do in the UK and the US, and I found that very interesting. And it was at the place where my father had studied and wanted me to end up in anyways. So it was a very interesting compromise, and I was very interested in what Polytechnique in that regard had to offer. And I had met with one of the directors, and she was describing something that was really the dream and what the school should be moving towards too anyways. And it ended up being the program was very new when I entered it, so there were some issues to deal with, but the promise of an international program at a reputable, very good institution was fulfilled. Like, we had the opportunity to study very well. And the important thing also is that in the end, the math program of the first, second, and third year at the bachelor program is the same as the one in prépa. It's just taught in a different way. And since there are three majors in the bachelor program, it's mathematics, physics, mathematics, computer science, mathematics, economics. It's always rooted in mathematics, but not only. So a lot of students are obviously interested in physics because that's what Polytechnique offers. Computer science is rising, and I think Polytechnique could be on the way to become a leading institution in that field. And economics is also a lot of students at Polytechnique do end up working in economics related fields. So I think it was a perfect bridge really between the harshness of the prépa, but also the more first the international aspect of international universities, but also the more open way. We had a few choices of courses that we could take, not too many, of course, but they did matter because they allowed you to spend your time on so many more interesting projects than you ever possibly could have done in prépa. So in the end, I think the bachelor program is very much an improvement on everything that exists everywhere, and it's getting more and more recognized, and even sometimes more than other programs at Polytechnique, which are 200 years old. But as described, they're really rigid, and they haven't changed that much in 200 years, and they are good for producing some specific types of people that France likes to have, but it doesn't fulfill the demand completely. So I think I made the right choice in where I studied, and there were many students at EjM who applied and got in my year and the year below and in the years that followed. So I think it's a very good place to go to after EjM. It's very complementary also.
The bachelor's program is an immense progress in terms of French education, because instead of relying on a 3-day exam, which is very limited in scope of how you value someone, you don't have this 2 or 3 year period of intense mathematics, which are no longer useful at the time today, where you have artificial intelligence and high power computing capacities. So you get in this program just a little bit like you get in an American university or a UK university. Same kind of admission process with a dossier and some what you do out of school, in school, and a couple of interviews. And when they see, and of course you need to show your grades, but when they see that you fit in the program, you need to speak English also, they accept you. So it is the opposite of classe préparatoire à Louis le Grand or Ginette. It's this bachelor's program is in the same spirit than Ecole Janine Manuel, and the same spirit of as UK, US universities. So it's probably France going mainstream. My advice, and it's revolutionary for someone who did classe préparatoire, was for him not to attend classe préparatoire, which I think he may have done them, but anyway, I was convinced from the very start, when he was in second, that he was good in maths, not doing much. The choice was clear for him not to go to classe préparatoire, but to go directly to a school in France or the US or the UK. He didn't want to go to the UK, but France or the US. And Ecole Polytechnique did fit very much in his with his character, because he's not similar, but he looks a little bit like me.
And on the topic of making choices and choosing the bachelor program, Madame Bosque once said in an interview for the Ecole, that from her personal experience, she believes that children must make their own decisions when it comes to education and profession.
Of course.
And I was wondering if you, as a parent, have had a significant influence on your children's choices of education or profession.
Good question. On Elisabeth, I think zero after Ecole Manuel. At Ecole Manuel, you're talking at Ecole Manuel or after?
I think before is kind of all the parents' choices because we're very young, but I would say more, yes, higher education, universities, and careers, paths.
No, so Elisabeth it's clearly her choice to go to the UK, and she did pretty much everything by herself with Mr. Bunch. As far as Anne France is concerned, so Elisabeth went to Exeter University. Okay. Anne France, she got in NYU in New York. That's also entirely her choice. I think I was probably against even her going to New York because I thought it was just not a right place to study. But she insisted going to New York and not Boston or somewhere else. She did not want to she go to the UK or France. She very much wanted to go to the US. That was her choice. And as far as my son, Alexandre, as I told you, probably influenced him not to go to classe préparatoire, but the rest is really his decision. Yeah.
Because in this second podcast, I'm doing interviews with 2 generations of alumni. I now have the opportunity to ask you about your career and your more long-term choices, which will allow us to understand more clearly where our education could lead us. So you, Mr. Hirsch, you've had a long and successful career, and I was wondering if you had a clear career goal from the start, or if you discovered your path along the way.
No, yes, absolutely no clear career path, and I just discovered it along the way. Yeah.
And I'm asking you
100%.
This question because I know that you studied mathematics and physics, like you said, despite your career shifting then more into economics and finance. With you founding your own hedge fund.
Yeah, not immediately after 5 years, but initially I went to Russia. Because it was opening up after the end of the Soviet Union, so it's just supposed to be a big market where you could, like the US 200 years ago. So that was the opportunity. The opportunity at the time actually was, the end of the Soviet Union and the opening up of Russia and the other republics. And then, benefiting from privatization, from the liberalization of the Russian economic system in the 1990s, as oligarchs did. We purchased vouchers. We invested those vouchers into at auctions to purchase companies, and we managed to get a decent chunk of companies which went up 1,000 times, and then we, with a friend from Stanford, we formed an investment fund, investing in Russian equities.
And you still do this to this day?
And I still do that today. It's not a lot of fun in the last 18 months, but the fund went up 9,000% since 2000. So it was pretty successful, yes.
And how significant would you say, or grievous, is it to realize that the chosen path is the right fit for us?
In Estonia, where we have a company, when you work for more than 3 years in a company, and when it's your 4th year in the same company, people are saying, you have a problem, you're a loser, you're staying for more than 3 years in a company, you are not good, you cannot find something else.
Something better.
So Um, so no, the speed of change of knowledge that you need to have is such that if you stop thinking for 5 years or you're learning more, then you're just totally out of the loop. Imagine someone, for instance, pre-COVID, most of the people, including myself, we're not doing Zoom calls or internet calls. Everything was physical meetings. Imagine someone in 2023 who does not interact with people with his or her computer. Well, that was the rule 5 years ago, in 2018, pre-COVID. So the technology is changing so much so that it's not a problem. So going back to your question, I know this is very specific to Ecole Polytechnique, but actually it's probably not. What they were saying at the time is do whatever you want until you are 30 years old. It doesn't matter.
And you believe
you just
so too?
accumulate experience,
Okay.
and you fail, you win, you fail, it doesn't matter. You need to live your different experiences, just like Anne France and Elisabeth are doing. And then when you are 30, you say, okay, maybe I'm going to do this or that. But before 30, the more you travel, the more you work in different companies, you have different experiences, the better it is.
And not
And it not necessarily linked to your specialization, because, for instance, my degree was actually mathematics and physics is very vague, but material science and engineering. I was funded by NASA, and my specialty was to build semiconductors in space. In space, in microgravity, when you build those semiconductors, then it was supposed to be super more profitable, efficient, etc., because gravity was not polluting the structure of those semiconductors, and you could get 100% of the material instead of 50 or 40%. I did my thesis on that. I took lots
Your
of courses on that,
at NASA?
research on that. Never used that, ever. But it did bring to me, research brings you, the possibility, the capacity to go further. And whatever you do with your job or else, you want people to go further than the state of knowledge today, which is what's important, whether it's digital marketing, painting, science, it doesn't matter. You want to go further than the state of the art.
And do you believe in making the wrong decisions? Because Madame Zibouron said one thing, that a lot of the students are overwhelmed when graduating schools because they think right now they're going to make such a big choice, and if it's wrong, it's going to have disadvantage. It's going to have consequences on all of their life. So is there such a thing as making a wrong choice? Or if we, for example, look at what we're good at, it's never going to be a wrong choice. And like you said, we can always learn more and adapt to the future.
But you have lots of people who quit school, even before the end of high school, and who still made a fortune. I think Xavier Niel, for instance, is somebody who I don't think he even finished school, or barely. Not going very far. Bill Gates and Zuckerberg, they were of course admitted to Harvard, but they quit.
Probably.
Yeah, they quit after 1 year, so they didn't finish at all. So I don't think you are going to make a fortune, if this is the target, with a PhD. Usually PhDs don't make a lot of money. Of course they do contribute to science or research, But it is true what Madame Zeboulon says is relatively true in 3 countries, which are still China, Russia, and France, where the system is still relatively rigid and competitive, and people along your life are asking you, where did you graduate from? That's not the case in the UK or the US or in other countries. So in France, is where did you graduate? In the UK, I can't remember exactly, but in the US, is how much money do you make, or how much money do you have? So there is in France this stigma, or they look at what you did from 18 to 25 in terms of degree still, and it matters. Not that much in the UK. For instance, in France, if you don't have a master's degree, it's just kind of relatively more difficult than in the UK and the US. Now, statistically, of course, people who have a degree, bachelor or master, are statistically doing better than when you quit after high school. But it's not. Those are
Individually,
statistics.
it's not the case. Okay.
So it depends on your character.
I started to work with a baker. My friend introduced him. He said he has a bakery, and he has so many things to do, and he knows how to do nothing, quote unquote. And I was the scolaire aspect of it, like Excel, PowerPoint, all of that is so easy, and he didn't own a computer, but he was a genius, and I think that's what makes magic. Like somebody with originality and genius, and like sees in the future, but literally like no organization or order, or like everything is just, you start from the bottom, and Drake. And I think that's what you have to find. You have to find you're complete.
I worked in the events industry in B2B, and I was doing digital marketing there, just campaigns, emails, the websites, the campaigns, etc. It was interesting, but it was not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. I was drawn to it because it was a dynamic kind of atmosphere, but then COVID happened, and the events industry kind of plummeted at that point, because obviously events couldn't happen anymore. So it was very chaotic, because they had to come up with solutions, and it was, digital solutions, but it's a very big company owned by another big company, so it was quite slow. So I got a little bit frustrated in that field. So now I'm looking more at working for smaller companies or startups, or even starting my own business eventually. Personally, I am drawn to the wellness and beauty industry at the moment, and tech as well. There's just many fields that are interesting in this day and age, especially with AI starting to flourish in every field, is starting to bring a lot of interesting new things to so many industries. So
basically, you can sort of like combine 2 very opposite things, like your love for the planet and like math, and you can find that sort of combination anywhere nowadays.
I know you've been a dedicated supporter of our school, EjM, all these years, and it's clear that you value the education that you received and that you give back out of gratitude. So drawing back from your own experience now, could you please share how your time at EjM has positively influenced your life?
I think if I have to rank my education, EjM, Lycée Louis-Grand, Ecole Polytechnique, and MIT, Ecole Jeanne-Manuel is what brought me the most in comparison to the 3 others. The 3 others are diplomas that that you can talk about, but once again, the open-mindedness and the acceptance of the opinion of others and the possibility to create, to grasp new ideas, to adapt to a new situation is what Ecole Janine Manuel brings to its students.
There's the fact that, of course, it's an international school. We're all bilingual when we come out of it, but we're also, I think, always a bit multicultural when we come out of it, because we're exposed to the French perspective and the English perspective. So like when we have history classes in French, history classes in English, we got to see history from two different angles at a time where it's important to learn about it, and that's an opportunity that almost no one gets. We have that. We have just the fact that also sciences were taught in English than in French. We have just the whole international community helps you to understand people from different backgrounds. So all the international aspects of the school are very helpful, and in general lead to a better, more open view of the world. That's important for your culture, for your education, also for your personal, professional lives. Everything in your life is always helped when you have the most perspectives that you can have on it. And that was something that was given a lot at EjM. There was also the fact that, in my case personally, I met great, wonderful people there that I've remained friends with, and all these people are studying different things from me. Like some people are doing STEM stuff like physics, agriculture. Some others are doing more math and computer science. But there are also people doing some things completely different to me, such as international relations, film studies, art studies in general. It's all very journalism also. I know all these wonderful people that did very different things, and I've remained friends with them, and that's a great bonus, I think, is you get to see people evolve in their own different educational paths, and if you remain in contact with them, you'll see how it is, and that's again another gain in perspective. Other benefits, I would say, is that the school does push you to do the best you can, and it does give you opportunities that are extracurricular to achieve academic greatness. Like for example, I did the concours général in terminale for mathematics. I didn't rank first, obviously, but it was a very interesting thing to participate in. And there were also some after-school activities that I was in. The robotics club. There was a math physics after class sort of club where you could study more advanced things. And of course there's all the leadership opportunities it gives you to learn of. So I did the student council thing, but also being simply a délégué of a class, and there are a bunch of clubs and activities where you could start your experience of leading people, and all those are extremely beneficial, extremely important, and I think rare in general to the general population, I think.
And did you have a favorite teacher from EjM?
My favorite teacher, yeah. But yes, although I was not specifically gifted in history and geography, Mr. Woodall was pretty nice. Madame Zeboulon, at some point, was my math teacher.
Oh, really?
So one of my favorite teachers was Mr. Javelot. I don't know if he still teaches there. I loved him because he was very passionate. He was one of those teachers that doesn't really he's just really into his subject, and he was very theatrical and very inspiring. And he communicated his passion very well to his students. And I know that everybody really liked him. And he taught history, I think.
Yeah.
And I also had him
Histoire
in spécialisation sciences politiques, which was a spécialisation that we had in ES. It probably does not exist anymore, but yeah.
So I had very good teachers at EjM. Since I did mathematics, of course, I must have had very good math professors, and that's really the case. I had Madame Dachelet in quatrième and in première. Very good math professor, very how would I say, very clear in her way of teaching. Yeah, she was very nice. And Madame Calvo, who also a mathematics professor, who I know she was a bit harsh on students, but I found her way of teaching very, very good. She was, I think, she came from prépa studies and did a grande école, so she knew about like very clear ways to explain things. So I found her way of teaching very good. It was always, theorem, proof, exercises. It was very well organized, and I thought her way of teaching was very good to me. And then a very good professor I had was Mr. McDermott, English professor, who I had in the last 3 years of high school. So he saw me in the time where I progressed a little bit in my English literature capabilities, and he was very encouraging, very open as a professor to different perspectives, very cool, easygoing, and a very good professor that I would recommend to everyone for English.
But we had a mixture of French and UK or US teachers, and it's the whole mix which makes things interesting, because you are switching from French to English from one point of view to the other, and that's what matters actually.
Do you have a piece of advice you would give to graduating students of EjM who are just finishing high school and embarking on this new journey?
I would definitely still advise to try attending university in the US or UK. So US is very expensive. UK is less expensive, but it's getting more expensive. It depends what is of interest to you. If you are interested in science, mathematics and physics, France is still good. Okay, for when you have a good level. But if you are interested, for instance, in economics or business, I would not advise France. So if you are interested in arts, or I think it varies. But if you are interested, for instance, in hospitality, there is a very good school in Switzerland. So it depends on your interest. But what's nice at Ecole EjM is you have advisors for every country. So you can go to Italy, you can go to Hong Kong, you can go to Australia, Canada. In order to select what you want to do, where you want to go, you need to visit those universities, because without visiting, you don't have the feel of, okay, I don't like that, or if it's all on paper, that's not good enough. And you visit a new university and you say, oh, I want to go there. And then you get some additional background, and you are more convincing when you do your application, because you can mention, oh, I like this city, I like this building, I like this this teacher or this person whom I met. That's the first thing. The second is, this is nothing, this is nothing special, but you need to choose your range. Don't overshoot. Try to get into something which is above your level, and don't undershoot on being too modest, and going to somewhere where you can do better. So, in order to establish your range, once again, you need to take time, visit, and look at all these programs, and not at the last minute, which means for you now.
Right now. Rising junior. Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess this goes the same for your career, being curious, finding out, learning about different professions to understand what you want to do later.
In terms of career?
Yes.
About career, yes, you need to anticipate, yes.
Anticipate,
exactly.
And also find out and learn. And
Yeah. I mean, exactly. In business, you need to anticipate, and it's the same to get admitted to, the university you're going to like. You need to anticipate and to prepare yourself.
Prepare in advance.
Yeah, not at the last minute.
So I know that the last few years of school are very, very stressful because they ask a lot from us, to a lot of decisions, a lot of work, and there's a lot of stress, especially if you want to apply to multiple countries or even the US alone. It's very stressful because there's a lot to prepare. You have to have good grades, etc. So my advice would be to not worry about making the right decision, because nowadays you can switch your major, you can even switch schools way more easily than like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So if you pick the wrong...
Or 20.
If you pick the wrong degree or the wrong school, it's not the end of the world, because you will be able to switch. I was surprised with my experience when I thought that everyone was doing well and, loving their degrees, and then I would find out eventually that lots of people had switched degrees or schools multiple times even because they weren't happy with their decision. So just to say that, it's okay not to have it all figured out by the time that you graduate from your bac from high school, and to just pick something that interests you, because higher education is more about what you want to learn more than, what job you will do.
In general, of course, there's I would say that you would have to try to do what you want as much as possible. If you can, if you can see a path in your life where you can progress in that field, do that. But also don't be afraid to fail if that happens, because my perspective is when you failed, a lot of the times if you were trying, you did not fail, the system failed you. So all you have to do is find a different way to succeed, and that comes with maybe reevaluating how you were studying or how you were just doing in general. But it should not be at all a symptom of you being bad at what you do if you fail. You just tried once and you failed, and then you try again. If you succeed the second time, that's very good. If you fail again, then you just try a third time a different way. So don't be afraid to fail, and of course, if you do what you want, and if you're passionate about it, and you end up working in that field, of course, there's a famous saying: if you work what you want to work, you'll never really work a day in your life, because you'll find a great pleasure in it. And so see what drives you, and don't be afraid to fail in that or elsewhere, really, but focus on what drives you.
And last question, what does success mean to you?
Success, I think, means being happy in life.
Be happy in life.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, this was great.
Cool.
Perfect.
Sociology is the most important study of the world. It's worth it because New York makes you really feel like you can achieve the world.
Thank you for tuning in on this episode of the Anxious Scholar podcast. See you in 2 weeks for the next interview, and don't miss out on any additional information on our Instagram @TheAnxiousScholar.